So if you've ever been confused on what a VCA versus opto versus FET compressor is, then you're in the right place. We're going to be explaining all of that to you today and their use cases inside of your mixes. My name is Tyson. I'm a mastering engineer here at Dinosaur Dog Mastering, and today we're going to be talking about compression. Before we do that though, I just want to let you know I do have a free guide available. It is the ultimate mixing checklist. You can pick that up for free in the description. It's the first link in the description of this video, or you can go to mastering.dinosaurdogstudio.com/checklist, and then you can pick up that guide there. With that said, let's talk about compressors. There are multiple types of compressors available in the analog hardware market, and most of our digital counterparts of those compressors are trying to recreate something that already exists. There's very few compressors that don't try to do that. That comes to the point though, you need to understand what is actually out there in the real world to actually utilize your plugins effectively. I'm going to be covering the three main types of compressors that you'll run into in both software and hardware versions. So the first one is a VCA type compressor. VCA stands for voltage controlled amplifier. Basically, it measures how much signal is coming in and then actually reduces that based on your parameters that you give it. VCA type compressors tend to be very, very transparent, and so they don't add too much color to the signal going through them, and it is the most common type of compressor there is. It does give you the most flexibility in terms of control. Usually they have the most number of controls that a compressor does. For example, they'll have a knee often, they'll have a ratio control, they'll have attack and release, so you can control all of that within the compressor itself. So it gives you the most amount of control, and also it is the most predictable type of compression because it's measuring the direct signal coming into the compressor. It is a very effective way to have a very predictable result. So these are often used in mix bus and mastering scenarios because of their transparency. They don't add too much color to the mix itself and offer you the most exact, precise measurement and impact of the audio itself. So these are really just your great around if you need dynamic control, I would reach for a VCA compressor first. Second type of compressor that we're going to be covering is a FET or FET or field effect transistor type compressor. Field effect transistor compression, whatever. FET compressors. FET compressors are similar to VCAs. Technically, you could say they're a subset of a VCA type compressor. However, the reason why these are unique is because instead of a VCA type compressor has a separate signal that goes off to a detector, which then detects the signal, then compresses, and the audio signal doesn't actually go through the detector itself, whereas a FET compressor, that scenario doesn't exist inside of a FET compressor. The most important thing to take away from a FET compressor and how it's unique from a VCA compressor is that it has a lot of color. So it will add a lot of analog vibes and characteristic to your sound, while it still has a lot of control and it has the ability to have a really fast attack. It still has a little bit more vibe, if you will, than a VCA type compressor. So these are often used to thicken up your drums and your bass and maybe your guitars if needed in order to really make your mix come to life in the way that only analog can. So the last one we're going to be covering today is an opto or optical type compressor. Optical type compressors are completely unique in terms of they use light instead of just electrical signal to detect when they should start compressing. Opto type compressors have your signal going into the compressor, then it has a chain where it then lights up a little LED light inside of it to then have a sensor to then read how much light is coming into it, and then compress the signal. The way that this is set up, it takes a while for when my signal goes into the compressor to go to that light up, then for the sensor to sense that there's light, and then start to compress. It's a much slower process than a VCA or a FET type compressor. What you'll end up with is a slower attack. It takes longer for it to react to signals going into it. Therefore, it is not very good for anything with a very fast transient, such as drums or any sort of percussion, honestly. And also for the mix bus, because it's not as precise and it doesn't have as much of a consistent treatment of the compression, it's not great use in those types of scenarios. What it is great with, though, is anything that needs a more musical vibe. The most common use case is stringed instruments and vocals for an opto-type compressor. The kind of the golden child of opto-type compressors is the LA2A, and that is widely known as one of the best vocal compressors in the world. An opto-type compressor is not as useful in a lot of scenarios. It's not really used as much for dynamic control as just adding character and flavor to your audio tracks. One thing too is that they don't necessarily read peak volume, but they read average volume. So if you have loud peaks happening, don't reach for opto compressor to try to control those. I would reach for a VCA or a digital compressor first. With that said, those are the three main types of compressors that you'll be using: the VCA, the FET, and the opto. The VCA is very transparent, great for controlling dynamics. FET is great for adding color and saturation to your tracks. And then the opto is great for adding some musicality to your tracks. With that said, if you found this at all helpful, then I would be honored if you would subscribe to my channel. I release videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday in order to help you get better mixes. Thanks for watching and have a fantastic week.